Well, Press TV has obtained information about the recent U.S.-Israeli operation in Isfahan. The information reveals the enemy's failure in the operation. According to evidence, the failed operation has nothing to do with the so-called rescue operation for an American airman. Evidence shows that the enemies wanted to infiltrate into nuclear facilities in Isfahan. The obtained information discloses Washington's miscalculations about the capabilities of Iran's air defense systems in the face of the enemy's aircraft. Some evidence suggests that the dismissed U.S. generals had warned the country's army about the risk of such an operation. But U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth insisted on carrying out the operation. Multiple aircraft had been dispatched while Iran's armed forces were waiting for them. Following the failed operation, Trump hurriedly held pressers to put a lid on his failure and to portray the mission as a rescue operation. But even Americans do not believe the Hollywood-style lies. The failure of the Operation Isfahan can be even worse than the U.S. Army defeat in the Tabas operation in 1980. Ample evidence has emerged regarding the recent operation by the American Zionist enemy in Isfahan, revealing a major strategic failure for the United States. The recent frantic threats from Trump are a result of his severe defeat in the recent Isfahan operation. The failed Isfahan operation followed extensive aerial reconnaissance missions conducted by the enemy in the preceding days. During these prior infiltration and reconnaissance missions before the Isfahan operation, the U.S. and possibly the Zionist regime lost a significant number of aircraft, including at least one A-10 plane and two Black Hawk helicopters. The 0 hour for the failed Isfahan operation was determined in a confidential meeting at the White House under the direct supervision of the U.S. president. It has now been clarified that this operation had no connection to the claimed mission to rescue a downed fighter pilot. Based on prior reconnaissance, a deserted airfield near one of Isfahan's nuclear facilities was selected as the landing site for the C-130 aircraft. Evidence suggests that the mission intended to infiltrate and to attack one of Isfahan's nuclear facilities. The Americans' miscalculation was their belief that Iran's air defense would be unable to counter the aircraft involved in this operation. Well, some indications suggest that U.S. generals who had been removed from their positions had issued serious warnings to the Secretary of War about the high risk of such an operation. However, due to Haig's lack of military knowledge and Trump's insistence on proceeding, the generals were removed just days before the Isfahan operation. But multiple aircraft were deployed for this operation, while Iranian armed forces were fully alert and waiting for their arrival. In reality, the U.S. Special Forces fell into a trap set by the Iranian military. The Iranian armed forces, including the Army, police, Revolutionary Guard, and local police forces, initially did not respond strongly when the first C-130 carrying dozens of Special Forces commandos landed. Evidence shows that this aircraft deviated slightly from the runway when landing at the deserted dirt airfield. Minutes later, a second C-130 carrying necessary equipment, including specialized vehicles and several MH-6 Little Bird helicopters and other support gear, approached the abandoned airfield. At that moment, the prepared Iranian forces targeted the second aircraft before it could land, forcing an emergency landing. Two Black Hawk helicopters also arrived after the second C-130 had landed. At this point, the aircraft, helicopters, and commandos disembarking from the first aircraft became prime targets for the Iranian armed forces. Once the U.S. Special Forces realized they had fallen into a trap, the White House Situation Room immediately decided to change the mission from infiltrating the nuclear site to rescuing the dozens of U.S. commandos under fire. The Americans quickly sent several smaller aircraft to evacuate their commandos and managed to extract them with great difficulty. This rescue operation, hastily conducted due to the entrapment of the forces, was so rushed that some soldiers and officers abandoned their equipment to save their lives. Evidence of this includes reconnaissance documents from one of the abandoned American officers. After evacuating the U.S. commandos, American fighter jets created a 5-kilometer fire perimeter to prevent Iranian forces from approaching the abandoned C-130s. They also carried out heavy bombing of their own equipment to prevent it from falling into Iranian hands. In this failed operation, U.S. Special Forces did not even have the opportunity to launch the Little Bird helicopters, some of which were destroyed on the ground or even inside of the second C-130. Following this humiliating and heavy defeat, Trump hastily and chaotically held multiple press conferences to cover up the failure and to portray it as a pilot rescue mission. Trump's publicity stunts, along with his ill-informed Secretary of War, who in a Hollywood-style manner lied about this failed operation, have not even been accepted by many Americans. It is expected that Trump will continue to fabricate Hollywood-style operations to create false achievements for public opinion. However, his repeated storytelling and lies, along with those of his Secretary of War, which have lowered public trust in him, is at an all-time low and have made him Goebbels-style claim barely believable. American and global public opinion is questioning how a country supposedly left without air defenses, an army or armed forces could manage to destroy such a number of fighter jets, diverse aircraft, helicopters, and drones, and continues to catalog these destroyed assets. While the heavy defeat of the Isfahan operation could be recorded as the worst and most humiliating failure of the U.S. military, even surpassing the failed Tabas operation of 1980, 1359 on the Iranian calendar. It is expected that the heavy aftershocks of Trump's major fiasco will affect not only the course of the war, but also the political future of this reckless and ignorant U.S. president, his party, and the American political landscape for years to come. Well, this has been a statement, of course, the information that was given to Press TV, and we're going to take a look at exactly what it all could mean. Thank you so much.